Working the night shift can be lonely. The hum of machinery, the echo of footsteps in vast empty spaces, the eerie stillness that seems to press in when the clock ticks past midnight. It all has a way of playing tricks on your mind. But sometimes, those chills up your spine aren't just your imagination. Tonight, we're diving into 3 true haunting warehouse night shift horror stories, tales from people who experience things they still can't explain. Whether it's something they saw, something they heard, or something they felt, these stories will make you think twice about walking through a dark warehouse alone. So grab a blanket, turn the lights low, and get ready. Because these aren't just stories. They're real accounts from real people who swear they were never the same after. Story 1. The forklift in Bay 12I used to work the overnight shift at a distribution center in northern Ohio, a place that handled everything from auto parts to seasonal decorations. Big building, cavernous. You'd hear your own footsteps follow you down the aisles. This happened during a December shift, maybe 4 years ago. It was snowing hard outside, which made everything inside feel quieter, more insulated. There were only 3 of us working that night: me, my buddy Cliff, and our supervisor Gerald. Around 1 a.m., I went to retrieve a pallet jack from Bay 12, one of the farthest loading zones in the building. Now, Bay 12 had a bit of a reputation among the crew. Nothing official. Just rumors that people felt uneasy there. One guy swore he saw a shadow move on its own. Another claimed to hear whispering when he was alone. But nobody took it seriously. Anyway, as I walked toward Bay 12, I heard the beep, beep, beep of a forklift reversing. That wasn't strange, until I remembered we had no forklift scheduled for use that night. Everything was being moved manually. I stopped dead in my tracks. The sound came from Bay 12. I turned the corner and saw the forklift. It was moving, slowly backing up, headlights on, the beeping echoing off the concrete. But there was no one in the seat. I froze, just stood there watching it until it stopped by itself. The thing just rolled to a halt, lights still on, no operator, no keys in the ignition, nothing. I radioed Cliff, told him to come to Bay 12. When he arrived, I didn't say anything, I just pointed. He looked at the forklift, then back at me, confused. "You started up?" he asked. I shook my head. Gerald showed up 10 minutes later, checked the log. The forklift wasn't even supposed to be powered on. The last person to use it had logged off at 7 p.m. and left the keys in the lockbox. We couldn't explain it. We checked the security footage the next day. Guess what? The camera feed for Bay 12 had glitched out from 12:58 a.m. to 1:11 a.m. No footage, just static. I never went near that bay again. Story 2. The Shadow by the Conveyor Belt. Back in 2017, I worked in a massive packaging facility outside Atlanta. The kind of place where conveyor belts run all night, feeding endless boxes from one end to the other. Most nights were uneventful, boring even. But one night, something changed. I was alone on the west end of the floor, checking for a jam in the line. The conveyor belt was stopped, and I had to climb underneath to pull out a busted carton that had gotten wedged between the rollers. As I was crouched down, I felt something behind me. A shift in air pressure. A presence. You know that feeling when someone's standing right over your shoulder? It was exactly like that. I turned around quickly. No one. But I caught something in the corner of my eye. A shadow, tall and thin, sliding behind one of the columns. But there was no sound, no footsteps. Just this cold sensation, like static, crawling up my arms. I stood up, scanned the area, and called out. Nothing. Then the conveyor belt powered back on by itself. That shouldn't have happened. The control panel was still locked. I ran to the panel and saw it still showed an error. Code. The belt shouldn't have been moving at all. That's when I heard it. Whispering, low, muffled. I couldn't make out the words, but it was coming from inside the machinery, almost like someone was trapped in there speaking from under the rollers. I yanked the emergency stop and stepped back. The whispers stopped. But the air stayed heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm. I reported the incident. Maintenance couldn't replicate the belt powering on, and they said the control panel hadn't been tampered with. I asked around. One of the old-timers pulled me aside and told me something that's stuck with me ever since. He said years ago, before the warehouse expanded, a temp worker had died in that same area, fell into the machinery during a routine cleaning. They shut down the line for a week back then, but it was swept under the rug. OSHA barely looked into it. Sometimes, he said, you still hear him trying to call out. I transferred to a different shift not long after. Story 3. The Locker Room Screams. This one takes place in a cold storage warehouse up in Montana. I was working the graveyard shift. The place handled frozen goods, meat, vegetables, that kind of thing. We all wore heavy coats and gloves, and breaks were precious because it was cold in there. The locker room where we kept our personal stuff was tucked away in the back corner of the building, near the old freezer units that nobody used anymore. 1. Night, around 3 a.m., I went to grab some ibuprofen from my bag. My head was pounding and I needed a break. When I walked into the locker room, I felt a weird sense of tension, like I'd walked into an argument. But no one else was there. I looked around. Nothing but rows of lockers and a flickering light overhead. As I opened my locker, I heard something. A voice, then another, female, arguing. But the words were wrong, garbled, like they were speaking English but just barely. It was coming from the far end of the room near the old freezer door. I stood still, listening. The voices got louder, desperate, like a fight was happening on the other side of the wall. Then suddenly, a scream. High-pitched, blood-curdling. It echoed through the room. I bolted, ran out of there and slammed the locker room door behind me. I reported it to my supervisor. She looked at me like I was crazy but walked back with me to check. When we opened the door again, nothing. Silence. The light was no longer flickering. 2 days later, I found out something that chilled me to the bone. That old freezer unit? Back in the early 90s, there had been a major accident. A malfunction locked 2 workers, both women, inside overnight. They froze to death before anyone realized they were missing. Since then, most people avoided the locker room during solo breaks. But no one really talked about it, like it was some open secret they didn't want to acknowledge. To this day, I don't know if I heard ghosts or if the walls remembered what happened, but I swear to you, something still screams in that room. Warehouses are places of order, systems, inventory, timing. But when the sun goes down and the machines grow, quiet, something else seems to awaken. Maybe it's the silence, maybe it's the isolation, or maybe these buildings have soaked in more than just oil and dust. Whether it's phantom footsteps, whispered voices, or machinery moving on its own, the stories you just heard weren't from thrill seekers or ghost hunters. They were from regular people, just doing their jobs, until something happened that changed everything. If you've ever worked a night shift, especially in a big, empty building, you probably know that feeling. That little chill at the base of your neck. That moment when you're sure you're not alone. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more true horror stories every week. And if you have a creepy experience of your own, especially from your job, share it in the comments. We might feature it in an upcoming video. Stay safe out there, and whatever you do, don't look back when you're alone in the dark.